Hello.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm glad you popped on because Bethany, she didn't send out an email and I think she's traveling. So I was reaching out to her saying, "Hey, are you going to send that?"
Yes, but she said in I think in more than one email that it's the
Okay.
same link every week. So I think
I know she did, but I also know people need their reminder emails. So you're good. Okay, so behind you, is that from AI or is that something you videotaped?
so I teach children on Zoom how to write, and my children are always showing me these cool things. And in the last class that I taught, the little girl that I was working with, she said, "Linda Beth, I want you to put on the ocean." And do you know how to do it?
I mean, no, I don't. I think I
Oh,
have found a different background in the past, um, but it was just stationary, I think. I don't think it was moving.
so I this is the first one that I have found that moves too. And what's fun about it is when I'm teaching, I feel like I'm really at the beach. I feel like I'm sitting at the beach, and it's
Yeah,
kind of cool.
good. I'm glad you feel you look like you are too. So
Uh, well, it's my preferred place on the planet. I
that's
love
good.
Marin, but I don't like that you gotta drive to go to the beach.
Well, in some parts of Marin, you can be on the beach. I used to live in Stinson Beach.
Oh, wow. You did? Did you like
Mhm.
it?
Oh, I loved it. I did love it. I was having my second child though, and we had just one of those little small houses on the cayes, they're called, and we needed a bigger place and we were priced. We couldn't afford it. At that time of year, or at that time, there weren't a lot of houses on the market, but the ones that were like $1 million out of our price range. So we
Yeah.
ended up looking around all over Marin, and we were kind of disappointed until we found this place in Novato. We're happy
Oh,
here.
you're in Novato?
Yeah,
I'm in Novato.
yeah.
So are you
Yep.
close to Suka?
I mean, I'm in Belmarin Keys.
Oh my gosh, I love Belmarin Keys.
Yes,
Oh, I love, love, love it because I grew up in Florida.
it's so
And
much like
I
Florida.
re it when I go to Belmarin Keys, it's like going back to my childhood.
It feels like that. That's the first thing I said when we drove here to look in this neighborhood. I said, "This feels like Florida. So different than a
Did
lot
you
of other
did
parts
you
of Marin."
have did you spend time in Florida?
Not very much, no. A very short amount of time of my life, but it just did feel like Florida to me
Yeah.
anyway.
So now you understand full circle the background. That's like
Yeah, yeah. Then
I grew up in
that's the beach.
Naples. I grew up in Naples,
Uh-huh.
Florida on the beach.
Mm,
So
okay.
yeah, I go to
The
Belmarin
the
Keys
warm
like
beach.
I go to Pacheco Pond like twice a week.
Ah, yeah. You must, do you have a
I
dog?
just love, can you see this book?
No, no, it's
It's the
still part
book
of the
that you told
background.
me.
It's the
It's
background. Is it, which one is it?
the book that you Reverend Jagannath Carrera.
Yeah,
I
he's
just
great.
love this book, Kristen.
I
It's
know.
it's so clear and easy to read.
I know. I really do too. And I have the others and I've dibble dabbled in them, but I keep going back to this one.
And I understand why you do because it's so clear.
And beautifully written. I like his analogies and things like that. Whereas I don't know if you read Reverend Jack or no, Swami Satchidananda's.
On the other people?
Hi, Jenny.
Hello.
Hello. Happy.
How are you?
Good, good. It's July. Surprise.
Oh, here they come. Well, I'm about ready to get started since it is time. and I've got you folks here. So we are still in the first chapter, but we're going to finish the first chapter today. The section we stopped off at, we had just talked about the 4 locks and keys. So we're at 1.34. And in the book that I'm reading, he says, well, in this next section, all of the first word starts with or. So what they're saying is we just talked about how the 4 locks and keys removes the obstacles. And then in this next section, many of the next verses start with the word or. These are other ways. As I said, this book is full of, or Sri Patanjali is offering us tips and tricks of how to do this thing, calm our minds. And so this next section, my text refers to as the ors, the OARSs. Okay. So 1.34 says, or that calm is retained by the controlled exhalation or retention of the breath. The mind and the breath are related. So when the mind is really choppy and moving this way and that, and you start to feel like you're getting anxious, a tip is to just calm the mind and focus on the breath and slow the breath. There's a phrase I've heard, the mind and the breath are like synchronized swimmers. When one is choppy, the other is going to be choppy too. When we regulate the breath, the mind will become clear and calm. By gently extending the duration of exhalation and gradually increasing the retention of the breath, we exert a powerful calming influence on the mind. With that, let's do 3 rounds of breath. This one is from Andrew Weil. It's called 3-7-8 breath. It's kind of odd, those numbers, but we're gonna do this one because it has a long exhale and there's also retention of the breath. So it's an example of those 2 things that this sutra is saying. So let's go ahead and just sit comfortably, close our eyes, and I will count for you. Take an inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. Exhale. All the air out. One more. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Pause and breathe naturally. So there are many styles of breathing exercises that can calm you, and you may know of some. And that's yoga. It's one of the 8 limbs of yoga, which we will examine later. And it's just nice to know again that we have the power. We learned some mantra exercises yesterday, and now we're learning breathing exercises, and both of these have the power to calm our minds, or as Sri Patanjali would say, remove the obstacles that create the agitation. Moving on, or that undisturbed calmness is attained when the perception of a subtle sense object arises and holds the mind steady. So we talk about the sense objects, we talk about the senses, and that's how we experience life. And I find, and that we can get a little bit too much into the sense objects, and one of the 8 limbs of yoga is also restraining the sense objects and pulling back. But I think it's a great way to help people drop into the present moment. We spend a lot of time in our lives rehashing stuff that happened in the past, re-traumatizing ourselves about stuff that happened in our past. And we spend a lot of time worrying about the future, worrying about stuff that may or may not happen. So a powerful tip, a powerful tool is to just drop into our senses. So again, let's just take a moment right here and now and practice this one briefly. I would say close your eyes, even though, seeing is definitely utilizing your senses. And it's really nice if you actually are at the ocean. I was talking to Linda Beth about her screen background, but that's a great place to have your eyes open and focus on something that is just purely calming. There's something about water moving this way and that, or clouds in the sky, or even a beautiful flower. But for now, because we spend a lot of time with our eyes open and observing the world that way, let's close our eyes and notice the sounds around you with no judgment. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin, how your clothes feel against your skin. Notice how your body feels in the position that you've placed it. Notice the air going through your nostrils. Where does it go and how does it feel when it travels there? There might even be a sound. Notice also any smells that are around you. Maybe that of fresh air or somebody cooking in the other room. And maybe even taste in your mouth. And all the while you do that, try not to have any judgment. And gently open up your eyes. Okay, moving on, or concentrating on the supreme, or you could say the ever blissful light within, or you could say just bliss, or whatever it is that something else, that higher consciousness. I'm in Reverend Jagannath Carrera's book, and his notations on this are, we are asked to focus our mind on a truth that we have not yet experienced, that there is a divine light within. It requires a certain amount of faith to even try this. Eventually, the visualized light will disappear and be replaced with a true experience. Next, or by concentrating on a great soul's mind, which is totally freed from attachment to the senses. So it could be a saint if you are raised in, say, the Catholic religion, or a prophet, or a yogi, or somebody who you believe was enlightened that existed here on earth. It can be someone that you know or who had passed on, somebody who has come in contact with you in this lifetime who's just an inspiring person. Or by concentrating on an insight had during dream or deep sleep. And I don't know if you've ever had those experiences. I definitely have, where you get messages in your dreams. And you've been trying to work out a problem, or you feel like there's a dilemma, or you just kind of wake up. I remember I had an aunt, she's no longer with us, and she was mentally disabled. And her childhood was hard. She had this healing dream that really healed her relationship with her father. And it was real. It was real to her. Whatever came to her in that dream. Well, he came to her in that dream. I know because she described it, and it was like yes, I didn't approach the situation right, and he asked her for forgiveness in her dream, and I just thought that was really powerful. But she was healed from an experience she had just from that. So dreams can be really powerful. I would pay a lot of attention to them. They usually, in the case that I just said, it was about what she dreamt, but oftentimes it's not really about the dream, which might not make any sense at all, but it's about the emotion that you're left with. Your emotions are working something out in your dreams. Um, or by meditating on anything one chooses that is elevating. And so by Sri Patanjali saying this, he's saying, really don't overthink this. It's just find something that's inspiring. Like I said, I use the example of flowers. I think flowers are like little miracles. So just meditate on something inspiring. When I led this sutra group some time ago, there was a woman who said her dog, who she had for a long time and loved dearly, was ill, and she was meditating just by staring at him in his eyes. I love that. 4.1.41. Just as naturally pure crystal assumes shapes and colors of objects placed near it, so the yogi's mind, with its total weakened modifications is what we're trying to do, remember? So once we weaken the modifications, the mind becomes clear and balanced and attains a state devoid of differences between the knower and the knowable and the knowledge. And this culmination is samadhi. We brought up that term before, as we will cover later. It didn't come up in the beginning. As we cover later, the 8 limbs of yoga, the goal is samadhi. Samadhi is this state of peace and calm. And again, I said it before, I'll say it again, because all this stuff is worth repeating. I know it's all new. Samadhi is absorption, or you could say understanding. Oh, he's describing it here. Samadhi is the zenith of the meditative process. It is a state in which insight is gained. The mind temporarily gives up its self identity and seems to vanish as it allows the object of meditation to shine forth. And then he goes and describes the different levels of samadhi again. I think he did that before, but that's starting to happen again. And he's talking about one of them, which comes with studying and examination. And he talks about another one, which is, let's see, let's see, which is this one? Is just more intuitive. And 1.47 says, in the pure clarity of nirvichara samadhi, the supreme self shines through. And self is capitalized when they're talking about like the true self, because then there's the sort of self that is all the characteristics that we see about ourselves or that we place upon ourselves, which is with the small s, which is where the ego self relies. So your true self is revealed. And this is the truth bearing wisdom. And that is what samadhi is too. It's truth and it's wisdom. And that's part of this experience of having clarity of mind. The purpose of this special wisdom is different from the insights gained by study and sacred traditions and inference. So again, there's another level. There's knowledge gained by study, there's inference, and then there's this intuitive knowledge. And these are levels of samadhi. In this samadhi, the self, with capital S, confers a truth-bearing wisdom, the discernment of Purusha and Prakriti, Prakriti being the thing of nature that's always changing, this experience we're having on this planet now that includes evolution, where everything is temporary and impermanent, and Purusha, that thing which is everlasting. This discernment cannot be achieved through study and inference. It is achieved by this practices. This samadhi generates powerful inclination of the mind towards uninterrupted stillness, mastery, and ultimately spiritual union. As wonderful as this samadhi is, there is still one more step, one more level. And that is when, so we've talked about dualism, and this, what we've talked about and what Sri Patanjali has talked about is there is a higher power, and then there is us. And yet to see it, we need to kind of remove the clouds, right? To see the light. But at the highest level, the light is also within. We are that. We come from source. We are source. So even the feeling of I have realized the absolute need is left behind. We have not yet realized that we are that which we behold. The final step is the transcendence of the mind. This realization is described in the next sutra. 1.51. With the stilling of even this impression, every impression is wiped out, and there is nirbija, seedless samadhi. So some of the samadhis that come before are kind of temporary. We can experience them and we can feel them, but then the seeds of our original, like, let's say, I would say original sin, that would be a term that would come up in, uh, in the Catholic faith of, like, that Adam and Eve are impure or whatever, that will arise again. But ultimately, the ultimate goal, and he's trying in this chapter, this first chapter, trying to describe what the destination is. And so this last sutra of the first chapter says, the finite mind cannot grasp the infinite. The mind needs to be transcended to reach the final stage. The universe and self melt into the experience of oneness. In the Vedas, and Vedas is a faith, Vedanta, it's a faith that kind of, it was before Patanjali wrote all of this stuff down, this existed side by side. And the difference in the teachings are so very similar, but the difference in the teachings is it's not considered dualistic. In the Vedas, this truth is expressed as Brahman, God, or the absolute, is one without a second. So it's not dualistic. That means that all there is God. Everything is God. You are God. We are God. Everybody is God. And I guess in this that we're studying, I'm just realizing this now, it's that we can achieve that experience of God. But as we are having this experience and we're intertwined with the ego self, we kind of need, what we're trying to do is remove the obstacles. I have not studied Vedanta, so I'm just trying to draw a distinction without complete knowledge. But anyway, this level of samadhi, nirbija samadhi, is the experience of complete oneness. You realize that the real you was never born and will never die. You are already. That's a good place for questions and comments. Not too many questions, because I'm still grappling with this myself. Anyone? Thoughts?
I just feel like it's hard to conceptualize. Like how would you know if you reach samadhi? It's like hard to imagine it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I
Mhm.
guess all you can do is look back and have you ever felt this glimpse of like just something else? And it's hard to know if that's it, but it's like some of these texts that are written, which are not written by Sri Patanjali, they're written by other people who've studied these. Some of these texts kind of describe it as like, yeah, we get glimpses from time to time, and they just don't overthink, when we have or when we haven't. But and sometimes I read this and I'm just like, I mean, if I can even scratch the surface, if I can even get to like, I'm still working on so many of the other eight limbs of yoga. There's plenty of work for me there in this lifetime. So I'm just not really sure. And I don't think we have to know, but
Mm,
but I do like the idea of it's what we're talking about is really removing obstacles, and we have the power within. And there are tips and tricks to calm your mind, because otherwise I find this life experience is pretty darn overwhelming.
yeah.
I will say this chapter is um it is pretty heady stuff, so I'm kind of happy we're through it now. We started when I did my teacher training, we were reading this text, the Reverend Jagannath Pereira's text inside the Yoga Sutras. And the thing is, we started on chapter 2 and then we went back to chapter 1. But I like reading it in order.
Mhm.
Anyway, so in this chapter, I think we're going to get more to something that is practical. In fact, it's the name of the chapter and chapter Pada. So my book, as I'm looking at the first page of the chapter, it says Pada 2. That means chapter 2. And Sadhana Pada. It's each of the chapters has kind of a heading, a name. Sadhana is like study. It's like what we're doing. And is anybody reading from a different text besides this one? I'm curious what yours says, because sometimes from book to book, the headings are, the chapter titles are different. So,
I have two, but I'm mostly reading from this one because the one that you have because it's easier to.
yeah,
But this is 1.5. No, 1.5.
we're at 2 now.
2.
We're
2
at
point. Okay.
2 point, before 2.1, there should be a
Before
little title.
2.1. Let's see if there's before 2.1. There's just a description. It says the second chapter is called Sadhana Pada.
Sadhanapada. Yeah,
Sadhana
that's what
Pada.
I thought. That's the one I have, I think. Anyway,
Oh, it describes the qualities necessary to change the mind effectively and gradually from a state of distraction to one of attention, and why these qualities are important and what the practice of them entails. That's what this
that's the
Desikachar,
charge.
yeah,
Okay.
says.
So anyway, that they're similar. And maybe next week, I don't have my other books within reach, but I'll show you examples of how they can be slightly different. Anyway, let's go dive in right now, because I feel like we I want to get us through all the way through the book. So we're gonna head on into chapter 2. I like the first verse of chapter 2. It talks about practices that, yeah, the second, it's the niyamas. Niyamas are the second of the eight limbs of yoga, and for some reason, and there are five of them, but right now he's bringing up three of the five. I don't know right now, and it's 2.1 says accepting pain as help for purification, which is tapas. Tapas, TAPA is how it's spelled. It's, like the little Spanish appetizers, but it's that directly translates to the word heat. And heat is transformative. Like, you know, if you heat metal, you can make it into something else. And so it's also translated into discipline. And the idea is that discipline can transform things. Like if you were really overweight and you needed to lose weight, you would have to go on a diet, and that takes discipline. But by doing that, you can transform your body. That was just one example. And so I like the way Reverend Jagannath Carrera defines this. He says also accepting pain as a help for purification. And we'll talk more about that, but I think that's a really powerful way to describe discipline. And then study, also svadhyaya, it's like the beginning of this chapter. Svadhyaya is study, it's what we're doing now. We want more knowledge, so we're taking the time to dive into it. And Ishvara Pranadhana. You could say leading a life dedicated to God, but you could scratch the word God out and insert anything you want there, whatever it is you would call some kind of higher power. And also just surrender. Surrender. Ishvara Pranadhana, if you don't happen to believe in a higher power, that's fine. I think this text is helpful to you. And as I said, one of my teachers doesn't believe in dualistic experience, and she comes from more of the Buddhist realm. But this is surrender, and this is hugely important in this lifetime. So let's go to tapas, accepting pain as help for purification. Good stuff here. We are challenged to have an outlook that anything that happens to us, no matter how painful, can be used for spiritual growth. And if you can just take a moment and think about all of the experiences of your life, some of them amazing and good, I'm sure, but all of us at this point in our lives have had some challenges come our way, right? And the belief is that that helps to catapult you to spiritual growth. And I will read on what Reverend Jagannath Carrera says because I like the way he says it. Everything truly is for our own good. Tapas is not a passive submission to the sorrows of life. It is not the embracing of pain, a friend or teacher or something unjust. Tapas begins to make sense only when we understand that pain is a sign that we have encountered a limitation. But to be free, we need to overcome our limitations. Therefore, they need to be exposed. That is greatly aided by the study and surrender to God, which is the next one. Tapas helps uncover hidden shortcomings by forcing them to surface. Taken with the right understanding, suffering can bring forth the effort to overcome limitations. It stimulates introspection and inspires creativity. For example, it can help us find fresh, meaningful ways to convince and entice ourselves to sit for daily meditation or to uncover a lesson hidden in our chronic disease that will bring us peace of mind. This is such a silly example. I've had a lot more hardships than this, but I did break my foot once, and it was right at a time when it was right at the end of COVID and all of the yoga studios were opening. And so all of the yoga teachers were kind of excited to get back in to teach and scrambling around to the yoga studios to teach. And I just broke my foot. And I just took it as a time. I was like, okay, well, I guess it's time for me to pick up the harmonium and take some singing lessons. So I just had a friend who broke her foot too, and she had this big travel adventure planned that she will have to cancel, and I shared that with her. But anyway, it's just I don't know if that's helpful or not. I look back and the many hardships of my life, and I do know that they have been a time of growth. So Reverend Jagannath Carrera in his book says Day after day, opportunities arise to practice acceptance, but instead we find ourselves caught up in resistance, anger, or depression. And that is why, you know, just acceptance is a huge part of that, accepting pain as a help for purification. And it can be voluntary too. Fasting as a religious practice is an example. I know that, again, I go back to my childhood religion, which was Catholicism, and there was something about like the monks would wear these necklaces that were like scratchy, like made out of these vines that were poking out, and they were actually really like this meant something to them as a penance. My father was very religious and Catholic, and I remember as he was dying and hospice was on board and involved, he didn't want to take any of the painkillers, and for this reason. I think of many religions like Gandhi. Watched that movie again. It was years ago, but I watched it again, and it was interesting after studying this for a while. But he stopped sitting in chairs. He stopped even like having things of comfort. He sat on the ground instead, and what were some other things? Renunciation is kind of a thing yogis do. He was trying, oh, maybe this was a documentary, but he was trying to not be involved in, well, this comes later. It's actually within the 8 limbs of yoga, brahmacharya, which is celibacy. He also was making his own clothes. So, and then I think of also in the Native American culture, what is it they do? Some kind of sun festival ritual where they attach something to their chest, and it I don't know. Anyway, there are many religions where uh they intentionally do something that brings about discomfort. And if any of you have an example, a better example, please chime in. Tapas is the embrace of the entirety of life. There's a quote that I like, and it says, I don't know who it's by right now, but this is the world, beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. We'll bring that one up later again too. And then Svadhyaya, which is study. All study in yoga is aimed at helping practitioners achieve self-realization. Study enlists the cooperation of the mind by keeping it inspired and focused on a goal. The study is the spirit. The subject of the study is the nature of spirit with a capital S, and the factors that observe our experience of it. We can also include the study of other authoritative works that teach accepted paths for spiritual liberation. So it might be that, I mean, and again, here I am. I was raised as a Catholic and stuff, but I've deviated that because I remember in college, well, I went even to a Catholic university, Santa Clara University, and we were required to take 2 courses on religion, and I took Eastern religion, and it was my favorite course there, and kind of never went back to Catholicism after that. But I think studying other religions is pretty interesting and powerful, especially when you can see some overlap. And then the last one that we're talking about here, which all of these three, you hear Kriya Yoga. That's a term you'll hear to describe these three. And then the next one is surrender. Surrender is letting go of limited personal desires for the sake of a greater and more fulfilling experience. So instead of running around this world, this experience, this time on this planet, trying to accumulate or trying to satisfy all of our senses, it's something else. And even acceptance of pain as a means of purification is also a surrendering. Ishvara can represent a lot of things. It's a role model for us to emulate. So if you know Ishvara Pranadhana, Pranadhana is the surrender part. Ishvara is this higher power, and it could be different things for different people. It could represent total liberation, liberation to the limitations of our human experience that we have, these obstacles we're trying to remove. So liberation. It's a role model, something to emulate. It is a complete manifestation, the source of all knowledge. It's a teacher of all the teachers. Maybe it's where all knowledge really originally comes from. And it can be represented in a mantra for many different terms and names, and you can repeat, and the repetition of that mantra will bring us closer to experience this thing that we're talking about by removing the obstacles. So according to Raja Yoga, this that we are studying, what is the description of God or Ishvara that we might surrender to? God or Ishvara is our guide, eternally free from all limitations, beyond all suffering, and the source of all knowledge. Surrender can be found at the heart of meditation, obedience, and love, all three requiring giving up short-term personal wishes for a greater, more satisfying reality. In meditation, there's exertion to still the mind, and that strenuous exertion can create more mental modifications that need to be restrained. These forceful efforts are like attempts at calming the surface of the water by using our hand to smooth it out. It just doesn't work. So in meditation, surrendering will help. Surrendering, this process of letting go, as opposed to trying to latch on and grasp something and hold our attention to it, right? So letting go of the distracting thoughts. Obedience, the Latin verb obedire means to listen intently and implies to be open and receptive, an open and receptive attitude, the attitude of like a mother to her infant rather than a slave to his master. And then love, there can be no love without surrender of self-interest. The very essence of love is giving and caring. That's unconditional love. It's the act of surrendering oneself to something greater. And then, so that's all in 2.1, at least in this text. And 2.2 says, yoga helps us minimize the obstacles, and the practice of yoga helps us minimize the obstacles and obtain this thing called samadhi, which is the goal. The goal of yoga is not to actually attain something that is lacking. It is the realization of an already present reality. Yoga just removes the obstacles that obstruct the experience. And then 2.3 is a really important one that you could star. It talks about the 5 obstacles. Okay, now we've decided what we're doing is removing obstacles instead of going out and seeking something. What are the obstacles? Well, they're called kleshas, but you don't really need to know that. And in some ways there are 5 of them, or they could be distilled down to 3, but I will start talking about them. Again, kleshas means affliction, suffering, pain. They're like a genetic disorder that torments us throughout our lives. Ignorance is one of them. Ignorance is the lack of awareness of the self, the true self, the capital S self, which leads to identity with the body, mind self, the little s self. Egoism is the first result of this ignorance. The peace and fulfillment of the big self is lost, and now the mind is just trying to satisfy itself over and over and over again. The ego begins to form attachments to things, looking to bring them happiness, searching for external happiness. And then as we're doing that, we also become adverse to some things. So we're trying to avoid things. And then ultimately, the last one is we cling to life in this body. And that makes sense since it's the medium through which this mind and the sense organs are perceiving everything, all the pleasures of this life. But we start to forget that there is something else, something bigger. Ignorance, again, the knowledge referred to in the Bible is the same as the Adam and Eve thing. Adam and Eve, when they went into the Forbidden Garden, I don't know if I remember this correctly, they gained knowledge of individuality, but lost or became ignorant of the knowledge of God. They started identifying with the ego, with prakriti, with this experience of this planet, this world, this time that they're here, rather than that other thing, which is something bigger, which is God or Ishvara. And they realized this sense of the apple and how wonderful it tasted. They realized they were naked all of a sudden and felt shameful, like there was an attraction to each other, and that was so there. I think I never really understood this, but as I was reading this, I was like, oh, okay, that's what it's trying to say. This identity with the senses was happening. So they perceived as good things which were bringing them pleasure. And that is attachment and aversions. And so let's kind of think about that some more. We experience the world through our senses, and we're constantly trying to please them. And I remember when I had this years ago, I had this at my house, and I was a beautiful woman, Donna, and she was very faithful and came year after year after year. And she was like, but I like my attachments. I mean, we all go around and create this world that we like. We were talking about living near the ocean or being by the ocean. And I mean, it's so nice to be able to create a life in an area where we live, and where, yeah, surround yourself with stuff that brings you pleasure, right? But I think the important thing to note is that there is impermanence in all of these things too. And that's where it's not to say, well, you can decide how you want to live your life, but it's not to say you shouldn't surround yourself by those things, or you should go around and seeking painful experiences. I mean, some people are going to choose to do that when they hear these teachings, but it is to say that there's a certain amount of surrender and acceptance that comes with when, no matter how much you try to create this perfect bubble, there's going to be hardship, right? And that's just part of the experience. And then clinging to bodily life. Let's see how we are on time. Clinging to bodily life. Yeah, I mean, I will share with you all because it happened and I feel like I can talk about it. My husband passed away a year ago and he was my age. He was actually younger than I am. And he wasn't ready to die. He wasn't ready, but his body was literally just giving out. And his mind was there. And it was a powerful experience to see, right? And that is going to happen to all of us. Either the mind or the body goes first, but our experience is temporary. And, he participated in my last Yoga Sutra study group as he had that diagnosis, and I was really happy about that. But that is the reality of this life experience, right? This body is temporary. And so you can choose to believe that there is something that is beyond that, whether you call it a soul or what you want to call it, but that's that's the idea. That's the difference of Prakriti and Purusha. And I'm so glad that I've had these teachings before I went through that experience. But yeah, the Prakriti was the body was no longer going to house his soul. Yeah. And um, so 2.4 is where I am now. And I'll just read what Reverend Jagannath Pereira says. I kind of like it. Our daily experience of life suggests that there is a truckload of causes for suffering, but ultimately they are grounded in only one cause, avidya, which is ignorance, is how they translate it. And it's the ignorance of our true identity. And it's really fear of death, fear of no longer existing. So I asked my daughter as I was studying and reading up and highlighting for this, I asked her if I could share this experience. So she was very traumatized after my husband died. She's 25. And she's doing well in her life and everything like that. But she kept just having the images of him being sick, which I am grateful I don't. I still have the 30 years of experience with him. But she just kind of kept seeing her father being ill and the body essentially decomposing, right? Or falling apart. And so I have a friend who does certain kind of new treatment, therapeutic treatment, and I suggested my daughter contact her and participate in it. And she had this experience where, and again, sort of like those dreams when you have this insight or this information, or so she had this experience where her father visited her and they were communicating, and the communication was just do whatever makes you happy in this life, because someone her age is like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I've got to study, or work really hard and climb the corporate ladder or whatever. So just do what makes you happy. And the worst thing that can happen to you is you will die and I will be here. And she said that that just completely changed her life. It was a very life-changing experience. So anyway, that treatment was valuable, but that's not the point of it. The point is, to me, I just kept thinking about this as I was studying that there's nothing to fear in this life. That was kind of the message she got. There's nothing to fear in this life because there's something after. So worked for her. I kind of feel like maybe we should end there. That's a lot. I am totally open to questions, comments.
It's interesting with your husband. I remember that because I was in that group last year too, and but and a couple years earlier, I had lost my dad, who was, I mean, I'm a lot older than your daughter, but it was my primary relationship growing up. But I had a good friend who lost her mom at the same time, a similar time as I lost my dad, and she had a reaction. This is, I don't know how this is related, but I think it is. She had a reaction when her mother died that if her mother could die, anyone could die, because her mother was so strong. And if her mother could die, it just brought to her, that's what it took for her to realize that anyone could die, because how could the world,
Yeah.
it,
It was part of her lesson
it
of
was,
impermanence.
yes. And for me, I felt, okay, my father is gone, and I lost a very close friend the same year. If they could both be gone, then it's kind of like your daughter, but then I'm okay going too, basically.
Um,
You know, it's,
yeah,
I don't know, it was like they paved the way or something. Even if there
yeah,
isn't anything
yeah,
after this life, they still paved the way. I don't know.
yeah.
In, anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, like I said, the teachings, I know they've helped me so much. It's really interesting the way the universe works that I took this deep dive into this. And then, I mean, it's just that's what we're studying. We're studying that this life is impermanent,
Yeah.
even though it feels permanent. And we spend a lot of time and energy
Protecting it or
protecting it
protecting,
and
yeah.
believing this is all there is, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it felt right to share that with you guys because it is what we're studying, you know. And and it's when it can come in handy. I mean, because all of this stuff sounds very theoretical and stuff like that, but it's also happening all the time. It's happening every season. Leaves are falling off trees in the fall and they're decomposing into the earth. Yeah, go ahead, Linda Beth.
I was struck this morning when I learned that a family from Kentfield is missing in the hill country of Texas. And as I was following the floods in Texas this weekend, it never occurred to me that someone or a family from Marin would be disappeared. And I was reading on Instagram this morning a woman who's a beautiful writer and was writing about the devastation there. And she said, you know, all we feel it so locally and people are already moving on from it. But and I wrote her back, but I said, you know, the fact that it's a family from Marin and they've disappeared, it makes it more prescient. It makes it more reality that, you know, that impermanence is always happening, even when I was thinking about it. I was thinking, oh, well, that's not touching anybody here. It's there, but it was here. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
always, you know, before that, 4 girls died in
Yeah.
that car crash, and it's always here.
Right. I mean, and when it's not here, there's terrible things happening in other parts of this planet too. And that's why that quote, this is the world, beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. And that was the message and my daughter got in her experience when, you know, my husband came to her. It's like, don't be afraid.
I wanted to make one comment about the tapas, because in the last sentence about tapas, it says wisdom, faith, and fearlessness. These are the fruits of tapas. I never thought before about how fearlessness would be a result of tapas. I understood how wisdom and faith and strength and endurance were a product of tapas, but it made it that was an epiphany today for me,
Oh,
because if you do take on tapas in a systematic way, I can see how it can make you less afraid. I
yeah.
never
And
associated fearlessness with tapas.
yeah. And I feel like that's what they're talking about. Like the wisdom is the study and the faith and fearless faith is that Ishvara, you know, belief in something, and fearlessness is like that surrender.
Well,
And
when I'm practicing asana at Sukha, I'm gonna think more about this, the asana, the pain of the asana will help make me more fearless of death.
yeah. And what we do on the mat, by the way, when we're doing the physical practice, all of this stuff I could, and Iyengar does, he writes a book where you can translate all of this stuff and apply it to the physical practice of yoga, which that's just one of the wonderful things about the physical practice of yoga. And we can talk more about that too, if you guys would like, of just how to bring this. Sometimes that truth, being honest, and that'll come up in the 8 limbs of yoga, but you can transfer the whole. When we get to the 8 limbs of yoga, we'll break it down where, like, how do you practice this in the 1 hour when you go into asana? You can practice it in your life, but sometimes it's easier to just try to break it down into that 1 hour. Yeah. So let's see
I
where we
I'm
ended
I'm
up.
I'm I'm interested in learning or hearing anything you have to say as a teacher of asana about how the practice on the mat translates to everyday life. Anything on that is why that's actually why I'm in this class.
Okay, well, let's see. We have 2 minutes left. So let's just talk about the 3 that we were just talking about. Discipline. So again, it said it in the first chapter, show up regularly. That would be frequently. Like, let's say you pick a day. You could, I'm not going to tell you what, but 3 times a week, 2 times a week. And you're going to need to do it for a long period of time and with a certain amount of enthusiasm. So don't just get there and be like, "Ugh, I'm super annoyed at that person in front of me who just rolled their mat out right in front of me." Just know that, oh, this is part of my yoga practice too. Acceptance, practice letting go. But so that's what practice is, and practice takes discipline. And then when you're there in the class, there's a certain amount of letting go and surrendering. Let go of what you think you should be doing. Let go of any comparasana, that's the ego. And really draw your attention to the own wisdom that exists with your body. And also let go of, like, I see people get frustrated because they have an injury or they can't balance, as well as, the teacher or other people next to them. And then again, it takes some discipline to listen to the alignment points of the various teachers versus to just jump to the image that you think that you've seen before of how triangle is supposed to look or how downward facing dog is supposed to look. Because I believe at Sukha, I know you've got some teachers with some wisdom, and you can, and so we're talking Swadhyaya now. Now I'm talking about what we were talking about, tapas, discipline, and study. So the information is there, the information about the alignment points. It's just sometimes hard to take it all in. So give yourself that little moment to try to absorb the information of the teachers that they're giving you, and then the surrender to that this is your body, your practice, and there is no winning in it. There is no achieving anything. And I think that one of the most common things I see is that people, well, they'll ask me, I've had people ask me questions, but how do I get my heels down in downward facing dog? And my question is, why? Why is that important to you? Or I want to learn to do the full splits or something, like, why? Let's let go of some of those kinds of goals because that's not the thing. Also, letting go of, here's some more, of what we're talking about is, like, the room doesn't have to be a certain temperature in order for you to practice yoga. Some people come in, the room's too hot. I can't do this. I have to leave, open a door, turn on the fans. You know what? It's okay to sweat. The music's too loud. There's a lot of people get freaked out because they're experiencing something that wasn't the image they had in their head, and there's some discomfort. Yeah. I'm not going to be a teacher to tell you, okay, if you should be uncomfortable in order to get more flexible. That makes me nervous because I think people can injure themselves. So that's not what this tapas is about, this accepting pain as a means of purification. Don't do that.
Thank you.
Jolie, did you have a question? No? Okay. We went a little bit over. So let's go ahead and sign off. Thank you guys for showing
Thank
up.
you.
I'm really glad you
You.
remembered the time or saw my email. Okay, I'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you.